Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar on environmental justice and clean energy. My name is Jim Martin Schramm and I am the director of the Luther College Center for Sustainable Communities. This event is part of Luther's Civic Sustainability Initiative, which is a series of forums this academic year designed to build connections, foster conversation, and inspire actions towards a more just and livable world. One of the major challenges we face today is environmental justice, or rather environmental injustice. Far too many people of color and others in low-income households in the United States are either intentionally targeted or bear a disproportionate level of the burden created by the disposal of toxic wastes or the pollution produced by industry. Their exposure to harmful pollutants wreaks havoc on their health and limits their opportunities in significant ways. Another major challenge we face are the greenhouse gas emissions from the combustion of fossil fuels. Climate change is adversely affecting the lives of many today and is projected to have catastrophic impacts on people and on our planet in the future. We desperately need to make a fast transition away from fossil fuels and toward a clean energy future. Our webinar this evening addresses both of these critical issues, environmental justice and clean energy. I'm very pleased that Luther's Center for Sustainable Communities is co-hosting this event with our colleagues in the Winneshiek Energy District. The mission of the Winneshiek Energy District is to lead, implement, and accelerate a locally owned, inclusive, clean energy transition in Winneshiek County. WED's director, Andy Johnson, regrets that he can't join us this evening since he's taking his daughter on a tour of colleges out east. As a result, I have asked Joel Zook, an energy planner at the Winneshiek Energy District, to bring you his greetings and to offer a brief response to Sandra Henry's talk before we open it up for the Q&A period. At any point, starting now, you're invited to ask a question using the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening. Sandra Henry is the Senior Director of Energy and Sustainability for Elevate, a nonprofit organization in Chicago dedicated to creating equitable solutions to climate change that provide healthy, safe, and affordable homes for everyone. Prior to joining Elevate, Sandra Henry was the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Chicago. She led efforts to achieve a community-wide transition to 100% renewable energy by 2035 and to electrify Chicago's bus fleet by 2040. She also led efforts to build ground-mounted solar systems on city-owned and underutilized land as part of the Bloomberg Philanthropies American Cities Climate Challenge. For much of her career, Sandra Henry designed and managed energy programs for utilities in Minnesota and Illinois. She embraces market-driven strategies that integrate with the green building movement, and she has extensive knowledge of applied sustainability practices that can be measured successfully. At Elevate, Sandra Henry works to create clean energy access and climate solutions to advance a more just and equitable clean energy future. We're so grateful, Sandra, that you accepted our invitation to serve as one of the two keynote speakers during Luther's Climate Justice Week. We can't wait to hear what you have to say. So it's over to you, Sandra.
We are really, really keen on prioritizing communities that have traditionally been left out of the clean energy movement. And that includes renters, nonprofit organizations, which often they may be providing nonprofit services to communities and also acting as housing agencies. We are focused on low income and public housing and also under-resourced cities and communities. Also wanted to mention that because of that work, kind of organically, we're also serving as a platform or an amplifier for other organizations working in this space that may be focused specifically on environmental justice, and we're able to amplify their messages and the work that they're doing in their communities through our work in serving those areas. I also want to highlight the work that we're doing with Chicago Housing Authority. This is through our energy efficiency programs. We were able to upgrade over 4,500 exterior and interior lighting fixtures to high efficiency LEDs at Altgeld Gardens, which is a public housing development on the south side of the city of Chicago. The improvements resulted in the savings of over 1 million kilowatt hours and about $170,000 in operational savings as well. And then in addition to addressing energy savings and operational savings, we were also able to make the exterior safer by improving the exterior lighting, which was an issue of concern for the community in the past. So it's a great example of how we were able to braid together energy efficiency and also serving the needs of the communities. Another example, and I wanted to share, and this really highlights the importance of existing relationships in our work. Miss Ellis owns a 6-flat in a Chicago neighborhood called Englewood, and the 6-flat provides housing to affordable housing to folks in her neighborhood. And the 6-flat's been in her family for generations. And one February, she called us because she had a bill that was a gas bill that was over $10,000 a month. It just spiked immediately, and it caused her great concern because she was afraid she'd be disconnected. And she was also concerned she might lose this home that had been in her family for generations, which would disconnect that ability for her to pass on generational wealth. So she called us, I think, because she had an existing relationship with us and trusted us. And we were able to get out there the next day and determine that she did have a gas leak. We arranged for the gas leak repair. And we also were able to get a new boiler for her. And we were able to reduce her bill back to normal so that she could keep her home and keep providing stable and affordable housing to the Englewood neighborhood. We're also active in creating jobs in the energy efficiency and renewable energy arenas. And this slide just demonstrates our solar jobs training program in action. We're at the Millennium Solar Academy in this particular photo. So I want to just take a minute to pause and reflect on this question. Why is diversity, racial equity, and inclusion essential to creating clean energy communities? And this is how I like to frame it. It's another question, or maybe it's a statement, I don't know. If we're truly aiming for fully sustainable towns, cities, counties, and states that run and ultimately thrive on clean energy, then everyone must participate. And everyone includes young, old, poor, wealthy, Black, brown, Indigenous people of color. Everyone's voices must be heard, and everybody must have a seat at the table. So keeping that in mind, let's take a look at a couple of data points. The first we're going to look at is just the idea of energy burden. And this slide is specific to Chicago. And just think through, there are more than 1.7 million households in Illinois, or 36%, that are considered low income and earning less than $30,000 a year. And at the bottom of the slide, we can see that an average annual energy bill in Illinois is about $2,500. And we had some super smart researchers at Elevate crunched the numbers and came up with the statistic that, we think a household is considered energy burdened when energy costs exceed about 6% of household income. And in order for a household to afford this kind of bill, they'd need to earn about $41,000 annually. So looking at $41,000 versus $30,000, you can quickly see that low-income families are immediately in a hole, and it's really difficult to get out of that hole once you're in it. So that's what excites me about working in this industry and working for Elevate, and also excites me about other organizations that are in this industry as well. Through our work, we're able to address energy inequity on both ends of the spectrum. We can build a workforce that implements clean energy projects, and we can also deliver programs that bring benefits of energy efficiency and renewable energy to the folks that need it the most. And I do believe it is particularly important for low-income households, because through energy efficiency and renewable energy, we're able to ease some of that burden. So now we're going to have a look at energy burden for Winneshiek County. Thank you, Jim, for creating this slide. And I think the takeaways for me here are that we've got average energy burden on the right-hand side. And remember, we defined energy burden as 6%, greater than or equal to 6% was high, greater than or equal to 10% was severe. And if you look at where these dots are, this is the average energy burden for this category of federal poverty level. Most of these folks are either high or severe energy burden. So just, there could be some solutions that we could offer to Winneshiek County residents around energy efficiency and renewable energy that could potentially ease some of that burden. Another area I wanted to share is I did a little look into the clean energy jobs situation in Iowa. There's a website called Clean Jobs Midwest that provides all this data. So if you want to do a Google search and go check it out, it's pretty cool. It's got a lot of data in there if you're a data nerd like me. So on the left side of your screen, this is where the jobs are in terms of clean energy sectors. So the biggest sector, of course, job sector is energy efficiency, followed by renewable energy, and then advanced transportation, grid and storage, and then finally clean fuels. And then this side of the graph just shows who's working in that industry. And it's primarily white folks. There's another significant chunk of Hispanic or Latinx. And I think the takeaway in most cases would be we need to diversify this ring. However, it should reflect whatever is reflected in the communities that you're in. So maybe this is about right for Winneshiek County or for Iowa, but that's just a data point for everybody to think about. Also learned that clean energy jobs are found in every corner of the state in Iowa. And interestingly enough, about 44% or 14,000 jobs or so were found in rural areas of Iowa at the end of 2019. I thought that was kind of an interesting fact. COVID-19 has had an impact on jobs. There were about 5,000 job losses about 3 months into the pandemic around clean energy. And I tried to find some interesting data on what's the outlook across the nation, for the region. And I think folks are still trying to figure that out. But I am encouraged by what I'm seeing coming out of the Biden administration. The administration's move to rejoin the Paris Climate Accord, invest over $2 trillion in clean energy to fully decarbonize the power sector by 2035. That both send clear signals that we'll need to grow our workforce to meet those goals. And hopefully our states and cities will begin to implement policies that will support those efforts. Another thing I like to think about in terms of how we create clean energy communities is what kinds of programs are we designing and what's our intention? And three bullets I wanted to share that I think are important is to prioritize clean energy projects, to prioritize and incentivize clean energy projects for Black, Brown, and under-resourced communities, and that could be whatever folks are not typically at the table when these decisions are being made. So it could be different for Winneshiek or for Iowa. Another important point to remember is to create clean energy solutions that focus on affordable housing and shared public buildings. Those buildings often are not the first in line to receive the benefits of energy efficiency and renewable energy. And we also want to make sure that we're designing programs that catalyze job creation and business development that reflects the diversity of our local communities. So Jim, you've been a great resource for me in helping to prepare for this presentation. And one of the questions he asked me is what's coming out of the Biden administration that may help us advance some of these goals. So I did a little digging, and Justice 40 initiative is fairly recent initiative. I think there have been others, but this one caught my attention because there is a commitment in this initiative to plow 40% of the benefits of its clean energy and climate investments into disadvantaged communities. And I think that's a historic opportunity. The resulting funding levels across energy, water, housing, and transit significantly exceed anything that would be possible through philanthropy alone. And as a nonprofit, we're often chasing grants. So that's good news for folks working in this area. And that funding could represent like great opportunities to restore and repair our communities. Absolutely essential to those outcomes is just to remember that we need to provide those resources to the frontline community organizations that are, and have them take the lead on how we distribute this additional funding. If we miss that opportunity, we could get caught in this, that the typical organizations get the funding and nothing changes. So it's important to keep that in mind. Now I'm going to shift just a little bit to talk about policies, because I think policies are important. Good policies are important in creating clean energy economies or communities. And CEJA, the Clean Energy Jobs Act, is the latest legislation in Illinois that could be transformational in how we advance clean energy communities in Illinois. Its predecessor, FEJA, the Future Energy Jobs Act, really opened the door to advance energy efficiency initiatives. I think CEJA could be the legislation that helps us layer in equity. And so in this slide, there are a few components around equity listed. I just wanted to give you an update on where we are with the Clean Energy Jobs Act. It hasn't passed yet. There are 6 major energy bills in the General Assembly now, and of course, there are going to be some negotiations and some compromises, and hopefully they'll come up with one really good bill to pass by the end of May when our General Assembly ends. CEJA is supported by a coalition called the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, which consists of 100 organizations, including consumer advocates, environmental advocates, businesses, faith groups, community groups, environmental justice groups, labor organizations, and others. So more to come on that. We're hoping that it will pass. I think we're all optimistic. It's kind of been in discussion for almost 2 years now. So stay tuned. Another area that I think is really important is the actual programs that we implement. Right now, Elevate we're managing a couple of programs like solar energy jobs training that provides, that aims to build a workforce and expand small businesses to work in energy efficiency and solar energy in Illinois. We also have a contractor accelerator model that supports women and minority-owned contractor firms that want to work in energy efficiency and solar. It's kind of a cohort incubator method, which is getting some traction. And I want to just share a quick example about one of our entrepreneurs that's been through that program. The name of the company is Boyfriend in a Box, and I picked it because I really like that name. And so Andre White is the owner of the company, and he started his business by just doing handyman jobs on the side, and he became involved in energy efficiency and then wanted to expand into solar. So he got his certifications and brought on an electrician. And typically small businesses have challenges in the back office support area, like having an accountant or having someone that can help them just with, certification, things like that. So we connected Andre with an organization called Business Services Collective, or BSC, as it says in the slide, to help him get his finances in order and introduce him to QuickBooks and how to, do simple bookkeeping. And because his financials were in place and organized, he was able to enroll in the payroll protection program and take advantage of some funding that would keep him, solid through the pandemic. So I can't emphasize how important building community strength is in supporting policy and deploying programs. And my hope is that some of the examples that I shared with you today highlight that importance. Um, so I just want to take a minute and reflect on what you could do in your community. What does a just transition look like from going from a centralized fossil fuel economy to a clean energy ecosystem governed by communities? What does that look like in your region? Are the right folks at the table? How can we focus on the welfare of renters, public housing, low income, and under resourced communities that we covered earlier in the discussion? Are they at the table? And if not, where do we start? And I think that's a multi-layered conversation that's steeped in many elements like equity, equality, history, privilege, race and ethnicity, differences, and otherness and generational wealth. And that list I could probably list some more things. But I think we're here and having this conversation today because we believe the conversation is important and because we're willing to dive in and navigate what could be an unknown and uncomfortable waters. So where do we start? The advice I like to give is that, conversations are key, relationships are key. Think about who do you know and what communities or community-based organizations are in your neighborhoods. Who do you want to build strong relationships with? Set your intentions on getting to know one or two. Maybe it's a neighbor. It could be an organization. And you want to get to know them, learn their missions, their goals, their dreams, their aspirations, maybe their weaknesses and their strengths. Ask them what they need. Approach them with a desire to learn more. And remember that communities are the folks that you want to connect with, and they already have a vision for a just, sustainable, clean energy future. Remember not to come thinking you have all the answers, and to ask questions, preferably open-ended ones. Practice active listening, be present, and when the time is right, ask, how can I help? And then be ready. Be ready to be a door opener, be ready to be a connector, be an amplifier, and share that platform. And with that, I want to thank everybody for joining me tonight. And I want to thank Luther College and the Winneshiek Energy District for hosting me tonight. And Jim, I'm going to pass it off to you now.
Where is that darn unmute button? Thanks so much, Sandra. That was really great. Thank you so much. It was a fabulous presentation. Some of the participants tonight are students in the senior seminar in environmental studies, which is focused on the U.S. energy transition and energy democracy. And so much of what you said tonight is exactly the material that we've been covering in our class. So from a very self-interested perspective, all I can say is thank you for that. Before I turn it over to Joel, just to offer some brief remarks, I want to encourage all of you that are on the webinar to use the Q&A function at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen to pose your questions to Sandra. Please don't be shy. I know she is eager to hear your questions and to respond. So I'm going to turn it over to Joel now to provide a brief response to your presentation, Sandra. Joel graduated from the Illinois Institute of Technology, kind of in your backyard there, with a degree in architecture, and he's spent the last 6 years or so working in energy efficiency and renewable energy. He's helped over 200 Decorah area homeowners make decisions about their energy use, and he has also provided energy assessments to hundreds of farms and businesses across the state of Iowa. So over to you, Joel. Joel, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Jim. Keeping me on my toes here. Thank you. And thank you, Sandra, for your presentation. That was really great to see what you've been doing and to hear more about it. I've putting together a couple of questions as we wait for more folks to bring things in. And I think I'm going to give them to you one at a time because they're all sort of meaty questions. And so rather than to say them all together, I just thought maybe one at a time, and we can go on to the next one as our bosses in the chat room tell us to. And so I was really interested to see those figures from Illinois as well on energy burden, and to think about how that really is a universal problem. The average energy costs for the household in Illinois are pretty similar to what we see here in this corner of the state as well. And those, if your household that is even above the federal poverty level, you can be easily spending more than 6% of your income on energy. So just talk a little bit about, what that means for the opportunity. I'm assuming that if it's the same in Illinois and the same in Chicago and the same as in Winship County, that there's a lot of difference there between those two neighborhoods, I guess. So I'm assuming that's got to be similar across the whole country. And so how can we find a way to get those energy costs in control for those households? Those are the folks that need the most help. So.
Yeah, I think you're right on target, Joel. I mean, the Midwest historically has had relative to other parts of the country, lower energy costs. But the burden, I think, is universal. There is some burden. I have an opinion. I guess I'll just share that. My opinion is it's energy efficiency first. We must do everything we can to make our existing buildings as energy efficient as possible. If we're building new, then we need to make sure that our energy codes are addressing energy in a meaningful way, that we're making them as energy efficient as possible. We have to do that first. And then we need to think about how we provide affordable, renewable, or clean energy to those homes. The latest discussion, I guess maybe it's not so new, but there's a lot of focus on electrification now. Elevate is actually working on a project to figure out how do we electrify multifamily buildings. And electrification means that they don't use natural gas for heating, and they don't use natural gas for cooking. So what are those technologies? That's one thing that we have to identify. And then what does it cost to replace those gas-using appliances? And then how does that impact the service of the building, right? If you've got a 7-unit or a 6-unit flat, it's not just one unit, it's all of them. So we're uncovering a lot of in the weeds types of problems we need to solve. But I think from a high level, it's energy efficiency first, and then figuring out how we serve them with cleaner energy. That's the high level, but you can't not talk about energy efficiency. That's my opinion. I think a lot of folks agree, but that's what I've seen in the 30 years I've been in this business.
Joel, Sandra, let me jump in here. I think you said Elevate helps to implement Commonwealth Edison's energy efficiency programs, and I'm sure that's very similar to here in the state of Iowa, where state law requires that an investor-owned utility like Commonwealth Edison offer energy efficiency programs to their ratepayers. Mm-hmm. We've had some sort of retrenchment here in Iowa, where they have worked with legislators to reduce the sort of state legal expectations of them in terms of furnishing energy efficiency programs. I'm curious whether you've seen any kind of retrenchment in that regard in Illinois. But I guess more importantly, I'm interested in whether you feel like what Commonwealth Edison does offer, especially to low-income households, is adequate, or if they've been receptive to the sort of feedback that Elevate has given them as a principal contractor. I'm just curious, that how that relationship is, and I realize that can be a little delicate. I might be putting you on the spot here, but
well, I'll share what I can. So with it's a legislative discussion really with Future Energy Jobs Act, which was the first, kind of sweeping legislation that really, I think, transformed how Illinois implements energy efficiency. There was a lot of focus on, non-low income, I guess, programs, if you will. I mean, it was a bump, but it wasn't nearly as much as we needed to see for income qualified or low income households. I think with CEJA, we're aiming to bump that up even higher. I forget what their percentages are, but it's pretty significant now that the spending and that the energy savings need to come from the low income sector. And that's all driven by legislation that hasn't been passed yet.
Mhm.
So, there could be a compromise because I'm sure there are folks at ComEd or Exelon, which is their, their owner company. They're probably crunching the numbers to see, like, does this make sense? And ComEd, the investor-owned utilities in Illinois, can now earn a rate of return on their energy savings. So there's a financial benefit to doing the programs. So I think it's better, but I think the part that we run into at Elevate is, the ComEd programs really they only address energy efficiency. And for the income eligible or low income folks that are living in affordable housing units or public housing, often the need goes beyond efficiency. Sometimes we have to help them get a new roof before we can help them replace their boiler. It's just that, so it's,
Yeah.
and Elevate does a great job of trying to braid together different funding streams to address a building or a home like holistically, but it's a job. It's a lot of work to do that. And so utilities can address the efficiency, but for this type market segment, there's just so much more need. And in my dream of dreams, we would just have one funding source that could address everything, because it's still related. I mean, you can't help someone be more efficient if they need a new roof. You can't do it, but it should all be considered in one kind of stream of work, I think.
Sure.
Did that answer the question? I'm sorry, Jim.
Yeah, no, I think so, definitely. I see we have some questions coming in, but I know, Joel, you said you had a couple questions. You have another one you wanted to pose to Sandra that's connected to the energy district?
Well, my next one really was just one in making sure that we circled back to electrification, but I think that you've really talked about that. I'm really excited to see folks start thinking about that as part of the energy efficiency portfolio, and thinking about how you can start moving from fossil fuels that you burn inside your home, especially for cooking, as far as, all the indoor air quality impacts that can make. But for heating and water heating too, and looking at electric options that are really, that new technologies really in the past 5 years have made economically viable for a swap out where they really weren't in the past. And also the crossover of the makeup of our electric grid, where that switch now becomes something that is, due to the technology, it's using less energy and is more affordable, but also is using less net carbon, I guess, down the road, because fewer coal, especially, is being taken offline on the power grid, and more renewable energy is being brought online.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a story, I guess. When I was at, what's happened before I became this CSO, but Chicago did have they implemented muni aggregation. And while we're currently not aggregated, so we can pick any supplier for electricity, the law is still on the books. So, if Chicago really wants to flip the switch to go to renewable energy, they would just have to reenact just reinstate the muni aggregation ordinance, and then go figure out how to get, purchase clean energy. So that tool is still in their toolbox. I'm kind of waiting to see if they turn it on.
Yeah.
All right. Let me pose a question to you, Sandra, from one of our students, Charlie Sylvester. He's actually studying in Rochester, Minnesota this semester in Luther's program up there, and he's working, I think, for the city of Rochester's sustainability office. So his question goes like this. He says, does Illinois or Elevate address the split incentive of energy efficiency investments between tenants and landlords? And if so, how?
Not directly. I think it's always been a tough thing to do when you're a renter. So the programs that we currently implement, the incentives really, we incentivize the contractor to install energy efficient equipment. And so those incentives all go to the contractor. We don't have any, Elevate doesn't administer incentives to the owners or the tenants. So ComEd's programs, as far as I know, I haven't really looked at them lately, but I think ComEd's programs, the incentives go directly to the building owner.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was at ComEd, we had played around with some structures where perhaps the owner would agree in their lease arrangement to cost share the incentives. I don't know how far that went, but I think if that could be an option, because the owner has to agree to share the incentives in some fashion. Either it's through a reduction, if all utilities are included, maybe there's a reduction in that monthly fee, or they're sharing some portion of the incentive with the tenant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also an issue with commercial space too, with folks that are leasing space from in commercial office buildings too. Same idea.
Sure. Another question from I guess he's not a so recent graduate. I think Jamie graduated in 2014. It seems like yesterday. Anyway, his name is Jamie Stallman. He says, thanks so much, Sandra. I'm a Luther grad, current Humphrey School student and intern at Great River Energy. Said, we're excited about the impending vote on the Energy Conservation and Optimization Act in Minnesota. I think he's wondering whether you're familiar with that. He says, are there other state policies that are coming down the pike from other states that you think are better models of energy efficiency? He said, I know you mentioned CEJA in Illinois, but are there others? And to what extent, if you know anything about that Energy Conservation and Optimization Act in Minnesota, how does that sort of compare to CEJA?
Well, I don't, and thank you, Jamie, for sharing, because I will probably go do some research. But I can share, I worked in Minnesota for a while for Excel Energy, and I don't know what the current legislation looks like, but I will say that working in Minnesota with the Public Utilities Commission and the way they had structured the policies at the time, it was well structured, and I think they gave the utilities enough leeway to do really good program design. And the thing that I think Minnesota did that was far ahead of most states is they allowed the utilities to earn a rate of return on the energy that the utilities weren't able to sell. And that was, because it came out of the box like that, it would really allow the utilities to create solid programming in Minnesota. Illinois didn't do that initially. I think FEJA was a good move in that direction. As far as other states, New York is usually pretty progressive. I don't know if they've got new legislation coming down the pike, but like the IOU there, Con Ed, they just issued an RFP for energy efficiency programs. And they're also focused on some of the same issues we talked about today: equity, including folks that usually are not at the table. And I feel like New York is pretty progressive around their policies. California, we always watch California. They're kind of way out there, but it gives us, it's aspirational, right?
Yeah.
And we can kind of learn from their mistakes quite often. So those would be the few states that I think about in terms of policy and their legislation. I hope that's helpful, and thanks for sharing.
Yeah, well, I think we all have homework to do. Jamie is returning the favor as a former student. Hey, do some research, Martin Schramm. But I, for the participants on this webinar, I know talking about public policy and laws isn't particularly sexy or overly interesting, but it really constrains the whole situation. If what you want to do is help people who are poor with their energy costs, dealing with energy policy is really critical. In so many ways, it can limit what you can do. Mm-hmm. Sandra, just share with our listeners tonight what the average cost of a kilowatt hour of electricity is in Chicago. For a resident?
It's probably somewhere between maybe 8 to 10 cents, maybe a kilowatt hour. I think probably 10.
Yeah, and Joel, mm-hmm. what is the average cost for a customer of Alliant Energy in Winneshiek County for a resident?
Yeah, well, customer? I mean, Alliant is higher than the rest of the state. So, but I'd say that your average residential cost of energy for folks who are on Alliant Energy is about 16 cents a kilowatt hour.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I wanted our listeners to hear Sandra's response. Because, imagine if you were paying 16 cents a kilowatt hour in Chicago, right? 50% more than they're paying now, approximately. It's pretty eye-opening for
wow. So what drives that?
Joel, you want to?
No, I'm not going to touch that one. What I'm going to say is that that is one of the very primary reasons that we have so much solar here in Winneshiek County is because of those high prices.
Wow.
To get into why the cost is so high, I think is a history lesson and a policy lesson, and I'll let Jim teach that because he's the professor.
Okay, I guess Jim, I'll have to sign up for your class.
Yeah,
but
I won't bore everybody with that story. But since Joel brought up solar, and we do have a question here from an emerita faculty member. Her question is, what's the situation of tax credits for solar energy in Iowa? I know, Sandra, you're not going to be able to answer that, but Joel probably can.
Sure.
But after Joel answers that, Sandra, I'd appreciate it if you could talk a little bit more about how solar is finding its way into low-income neighborhoods in Chicago. How is that happening? It's definitely a challenge everywhere, but it's certainly a challenge here in Iowa. So, Joel, can you give Ruth Caldwell a quick update on where things stand with the tax credits for solar energy in Iowa?
Yeah, the quick thing is that just remember that there's both state and federal incentives. And so the federal incentives are 26% of system costs through the end of 2022, and then they go down to 22% the year after that. Iowa solar tax credits are currently at 11% of system costs, and they will expire this year unless the state legislature acts before they end this session, which it looked really optimistic at the beginning of the session, and it looks much less likely now. It's just kind of tied into a whole ball of other tax credits that they're trying to sort out. So if you would like the tax credits to be extended, you should contact your state representative and your state senators.
Thanks, Joel. So, Sandra, how is solar energy finding its way into low-income households in Chicago?
Well, so I'm going to preface everything with I'm not the program manager, but I do have a few data points to share. So FEJA, Future Energy Jobs Act, really set up the structure for Illinois Solar for All. And one thing is that the Illinois Solar for All program does not there is no cost to the consumer until the panels are generating electricity and seeing savings. So there's no upfront cost to the consumer, which I think is a big we removed a huge barrier. So there's no payments from the customer until they're seeing savings. And then we have a set of approved vendors, solar vendors, that can sell the electricity at a discount once the system is running. There are tax incentives in Illinois right now that essentially pay for the installation. So the real cost for the approved vendors is to acquire customers. There's essentially no cost for them for the installation. So I have an example too. I can it's a little weedy, but it sounds like the property owner, if you're in a rental situation, the property owner and the renter are purchasing the electricity together. They're in some kind of contract. And so the solar developer builds the system. He covers he or she, they cover the costs, and then they sell the electricity. So that's kind of how it works in Illinois currently. The incentives are extremely attractive, and that's what's generating the demand and the activity, the interest from the vendors in Illinois right now.
So they set aside a piece that says that if you are an income qualified end user, there's big tax credits to make it happen.
Yes.
Yeah, really neat.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal, actually.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. Just a reminder to those of you that are on campus here at Luther, during Climate Justice Week, we have a booth set up over in the lobby of our Center for Faith and Life, where you can stop by and write a letter to your elected representatives about anything related to environmental justice, a clean energy transition. So just remember that that's part of this Climate Justice Week, and you have that opportunity, and I hope you will do so. Another question from a current student in my seminar, Sandra, from Faye Duster. Faye says, I really appreciate you mentioning active listening in helping everyone participate in environmental justice work. I feel like many people overlook this skill and don't actually know how to do it properly, especially with people they don't really know or frequently interact with. Mm-hmm. Could you please give more tips on how to engage in active listening?
Sure, that's a great question. I think, one of the things I do, because it's really easy to get distracted, in this kind of Zoom world we live in now, is to repeat like what I hear you saying is, because that makes me listen too, right? So I'm just not moving through my talking points, but taking a pause or asking if you thought you caught, maybe you didn't catch all the details. Be comfortable in asking, can you tell me a little bit more about fill in the blank? Or if they mention something that's interesting to you, like, well, I'm really interested in solar, but I don't know how to do it. Like, tell me more about your situation. I think you want to, so there are a couple things. Ask open-ended questions that don't require a yes or a no. Mm-hmm. You're going to get more information that way. That often starts the conversation, and take notes. I think that's fine. And then from your notes, ask more open-ended questions and really do that. What I hear you saying is, let me make sure I understand this clearly. Could you clarify this point? I didn't quite understand what you were saying there. Those are the types of things I, use to make sure that the folks I'm chatting with feel like that they're being heard. And I think that would be helpful. So thanks for asking that question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sandra. Another question from Sharon Sales Belton. Yeah,
so it's my sister.
Oh, that's great. So she says, or asks, where can low-income communities learn more about renewable energy options in Chicago? are there community-based education programs?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, Elevate, that's a great question. So I think Elevate has a okay website. I don't know if we've ever done, we do have community outreach folks that go and do events in the community where we talk about renewable energy and energy efficiency opportunities. We haven't yet done like a convening, but I think it's in the works because I think it's a great idea. The city of Chicago is currently working on some workshops, work groups that will hopefully create this platform to be able to get more information about energy efficiency, decarbonization, electrification, renewable energy within the city of Chicago. In the meantime, I think Elevate, the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance is another great organization. The Citizens Utility Board is another great resource for learning more. Environmental EDF, Environmental Defense Fund, NRDC, these are all local, and well, they're national too, but they have really great resources online for learning more.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like where a person could go, we don't have that yet.
Mm-hmm.
Washington, D.C. has a really good model where they're creating this clean energy hub. It's actually a physical building where people can go and learn more. I would love to see that happen in the city. It might, we don't know yet, but I mean, that would be, I think that's the piece that's missing, is we need a physical place where folks can go and learn more and take classes and get their questions asked and connect. And it may happen in Chicago. New York has another really good model kind of for that. So I think it's starting to get some traction. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. We have one more question, and then Sandra, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to offer any final remarks. Joel, actually, I think this question is for you, and I think it's from Andy's brother, Eric Johnson. Eric asks, is the Winneshiek Energy District the only player in getting Winneshiek County low-income folks energy more affordable by reducing their carbon footprint?
No, we're not. I mean, I think I would say the primary agency that is really focused on low-income households is the Community Action Agency, which administers both the Low-Income Heating Assistance Program, which is a federal program that the Community Action implements, and that is heating assistance for people's utility bills if they have trouble paying bills, or if they are income qualified, they can get assistance paying their heating bills in the winter. And that same agency, Community Action, also administers the weatherization program. And I think that there's going to be a lot more dollars in weatherization, although I have not been paying as close attention to that as I maybe should have. And of course, Energy District does offer free, what we call a first step home energy assessment, which is mostly focused on things that can be done in a day or even a half a day. Changing out light bulbs and doing a quick blower door test to look for air leakage. And there's a couple other programs too that have funds for this or that or the other thing that energy can be wrapped into as a secondary piece.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Joel.
Yeah.
Certainly, there are a lot of proposals in Washington right now that are very germane to our topic this evening and other energy-related topics. So, if folks are not reading the newspapers or watching the news or listening to the radio, this is a good time to start paying attention in that regard. Sandra, any final thoughts or comments?
My final thought is just let's remember that this is the beginning of the conversation. This is what we're doing today is the beginning. And everybody on this call has a role to play. It's very simple. Just get to know your neighbors, the people next to you. Think about how you can be involved. Think about how you can be a part of building a clean energy community in your area. The lift is not super huge. It doesn't have to be gigantic. Just need a little natural curiosity and the willingness to learn. So I just want to thank you, everybody, for having me tonight. It was such a pleasure to chat with you. And I hope to see you all in person one day.
Yeah, absolutely, Sandra. We look forward to welcoming you here to Decorah and showing you around the Luther campus.
That'd be great.
It'd be a wonderful opportunity. So I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to you, Sandra, for sharing your insights with us this evening. It's hard not to feel hopeful about the future after hearing you speak. I also want to thank each of you who are attending our webinar this evening. May each of us do all that we can to combat environmental injustice and to promote a just and inclusive clean energy transition. Good evening.